I wanted to share with you a book I read recently. It's called Possum Living by Dolly Freed. And I heard about this book from another channel, Rob's Homemade Life. You might want to check him out. And he said it really influenced his lifestyle. So I bought it at a used bookstore and read it in one night. It's very interesting. It was written by an 18-year-old girl that chronicled her 5 years living with her father. They were only on a half-acre lot in Philadelphia, and she said it was, looked to me like lower middle class neighborhood. And they were pretty self-reliant, and this book goes in how. So let me relate a little of that to you. Hey, self-reliant citizens, this is Prepper Potpourri, and I'm reviewing a self-reliant book from the 1970s, but I have a lot of information on my channel from prepping to shelf-stable cooking and gardening. So if you'd like to receive notice of future videos, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell icon. And I thank you very much. Now, first off, I have to say, she makes it very clear that they weren't hippies or they weren't doing this for religious reasons. They were, she said, just lazy, didn't want to work so hard. And that's kind of an interesting premise. Let's see how they achieved their lifestyle. Now, she said they only spent about $700 a year. And that would be paying on property tax and grocery items that they couldn't provide themselves, like milk and butter. She said they spent about $5.60 a week at the grocery. Now you might be saying, well, how did they get that $700? Well, her father would take sometimes temporary jobs or handyman jobs, and she would do some housekeeping or babysitting when they needed money. So they worked when they needed to. So you might be asking, how do they provide everything they needed on a half acre? Well, interestingly enough, they kept in their basement rabbits and chickens. Oh, and that cellar that I'm talking about, it was only 14 feet by 17 feet. And when you think of it, having bunnies run around, the breeding bunnies were in cages, and chickens on the floor, I don't know. I kept wondering, how can they keep it really clean? Now, of course, they used that bunny and chicken manure to fertilize their garden. And their garden, they had two kind of separate ones together. They were about 1,600 square feet, and they grew their vegetables and herbs in it. And when I first read that, and she said there wasn't any smell, I found that hard to believe as somebody who keeps rabbits and chickens outside and has to clean up the manure. It can be very smelly. So I found that interesting, that they could keep them in their small cellar. Now, they didn't have a whole bunch of rabbits, but they had some breeding rabbits, and then they would eat some of the rabbits. And she said if the rabbits provided about 300 pounds of meat a year, and the chickens gave them about, I think she said they had about 3 chickens, laying hens, and that gave them up to a dozen eggs per week. They also had a garden where they were growing vegetables and sunchokes and various things that they would use in their diet. And they did a lot of fishing. She had a lot of recipes in the book for like fish balls and all kinds of different things. Now, for some reason, she said her dad usually fished in areas that you weren't supposed to, and I don't understand that. But anyway, they were provided with a lot of fish, and she had a lot of recipes, if you're interested, in her book on how to prepare them. And they didn't have a car. They used bicycles. And their philosophy was that instead of you owning possessions, they owned you. So they wanted to have as free of a lifestyle as they could. Now, I should point out that the name for this author, Dolly Freed, was not her real name. She used a pseudonym. But And she was pretty opinionated when she wrote. In one part she writes, I do want to have children someday. I want to have relationships. But I don't see why we would need to get married. And, she kind of goes on and on. And in some ways, sometimes naive about her father's behavior. They made their own alcohol. In fact, they have a page on it still in here. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here on page 137, how to make a still. So they made their own alcohol, and her father imbibed quite a bit of that. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Now, when she was asked about the title of the book, this is what she said. Sometimes Daddy frets and says we are little better than possums living this way. Possums can live most anywhere, even in big cities. They're the stupidest of animals, but they were on Earth millions of years before men appeared, and they are still going strong. They're all fat and sassy and seem to love life, or so I like to believe, and nothing you can do will persuade one to work in a factory or office. Possum living is what we call our life here and now. She goes on to say that their creed was, it's easier to learn to do without some of the things that money can buy than to earn the money to buy them. I guess that's true. It depends on how much you want those items. And she said, she understands that not everybody could live like this, but she says you could become, instead of a non-consumer, maybe just a mini consumer. So do some of the things that she suggests in this book to become more self-reliant. So when asked what she ate, she said, the meat from the rabbits in their cellar, the eggs from the chickens, fish and turtles caught in local water. And she has a lot about how to prepare turtles also. Meat from game creatures, vegetables from her garden, wild mushrooms, hickory nuts, walnuts, berries, and wild fruits, and a few edible weeds. So definitely they were foraging. And they got grain from the grocery store or what they gleaned. So they were making their own bread, doing everything manually, and it met most of their needs. Now, she also mentioned canning. Definitely it was not safe canning. She was canning the meat and only using a pressure canner that she admits said it should not be used for, it's not a canning pressure canner, it's just a pressure canner, but that is what she used. So she did preserve food also. And she also dehydrated mushrooms and fruits. And she made an observation about housing, saying that it's kind of like a treadmill, because you need a house near your job so you can get back and forth to your job, and then you need a job to pay for that house. So they went into a neighborhood where a house was being foreclosed on, and got it very inexpensively and did repairs themselves. And it seemed to work for them. And I like that she was realistic. She said, despite the problems facing the world today, I'm still glad I live now instead of in the good old days. Medical science has freed me of many long-suffering horrendous diseases that were so much a part of life in those good old days. And I'm grateful, but of course, there's a price tag. Now, they were lucky. They both stayed healthy because, of course, they had no health insurance. And one of the things that bothered me is she went into detail and didn't seem to have a problem with it at the time of her father sometimes negotiating techniques, which were, she says she's not advocating terrorism, but to me it was illegal activities, maybe kind of threaten somebody, crash a window with bricks, that type of thing. Completely illegal. But she idolized her dad. And to her, he could do nothing wrong. And I think her father and her were both genius levels. Not many, oh, I forgot to tell you. her father took her out of school in 7th grade. She was feeling a lot of anxiety. She just wasn't liking school. So he just took her out. Now, her brother that lived with her mother, he thrived in school, did well. Father had no problem. But he just saw that Dolly was in a lot of distress. But did that stop her learning? Nope. She went about daily to the library and between her father and her, schooled herself. In fact, when she was 18, she didn't have a high school transcript or diploma, but she took the SATs, aced them, and got into college. She ended up getting an aerospace technician engineering degree and doing very well for someone who only had initially a 7th grade education. But I first read this book, I didn't know whether to believe it or not. I mean, recently I read that a book that was very popular in the 70s when I was in high school, Go Ask Alice, which was supposed to be written from a diary of a young teenager that got addicted to drugs. Really, it wasn't from a diary. A 50-year-old Mormon therapist wrote it instead. So I thought, was this really written by such a young gal without real schooling at that time? And so I wanted to delve into it a little bit further. Well, I did find a documentary. So it's very grainy, but bear with me. I thought it was interesting to hear Dolly talk in her own words.
About making ends meet. If financial security didn't matter to Dolly and Frank, what was important?
Well, we didn't want to be in a 9-to-5 routine, and we didn't want to go live in some dreary wilderness. We didn't want to be hermits. We didn't want to be on welfare or charity. Mainly, we didn't want to work hard.
I also have the cellar part, and what she says seems to be true. Animals were ranging free in that small cellar.
We get about 300 pounds of meat out of this cellar, and the cellar could be anywhere. It could be in the middle of the sea. It's no trouble. They don't get very many diseases, and they're not hard to feed. Just grass, a little grain. Rabbit meat's good to eat, too. It's gourmet fare.
I also found an article written by Paige Williams that in 2010, she tracked down Dolly Freed, and so it's like almost 30 years later, to see what she became. And she knew her real name, but she did not reveal it. But Dolly was living in Houston, and she was now an educator, working as an environmental educator. She was a professor at a local university. She said, she worked really hard to be the aerospace technician, but then she realized that she thrived in an outdoor environment, and that really wasn't for her, so she changed her career paths. But she is married, kind of different from what she said in her book, what her philosophy was at that time, and she is raising kids. The kids mock her about, you said we don't have to get married, da-da-da-da. So I thought that was kind of funny. The sad part was that she revealed her father was completely estranged from the family. He became a raging alcoholic, and nobody could deal with him. And even though she wasn't seeing that when she wrote the book, a lot of effort was going into making that moonshine. And I think her father just got more and more addicted to alcohol. And it's too bad because he also had a wonderful brain, I think. So her father, who originally said, somebody asked him, well, what are you going to do? Because you don't have any Social Security, the way you work. And he said, oh, my daughter will look after me when I need be. Well, that wasn't the case. And I think it said he died and died alone. But Dolly is doing fine. She's thriving. She says she is half a possum now. She has changed her lifestyle. She's grown up a bit. She's not as naive. But she is still very, very frugal. So I thought it was really kind of interesting. Do I advocate the possum living lifestyle? Well, it's not for me. I was raised you work as hard as you can to get what you want. And if that meant that I worked full time and had 2 side hustles, that's what I did, because I wanted a lot. So it wasn't the lifestyle for me, but we can still learn. She said, because of their lifestyle, when there was doom and gloom about the stock market or other financial things, it didn't affect them. They'd be fine. So to me, the real core to this book is the more you can be financially independent and self-reliant, the more you don't have to depend on world events and the stock market. So I enjoyed the book. You can pick this up really inexpensively in a used bookstore, so you might want to check it out. As always, this is Prepper Potpourri saying, please subscribe and share the knowledge.